All right, here we go. All right, Hafide Toros Hamzo. This is a recording of what was to be yesterday's class for our Zoom classes. Dispensa zutalo na kalangof dangi na internet, Jeff's Pirates Cove. And so I wanted to, because next week we'll be continuing on in our lesson. So I just wanted to be able to go over what we were supposed to go over without keeping us, without putting us too far behind. And so we're going to go over birds, right? Yesterday, me and my family, the Guambas, we were at the migratory bird fair down at Jeff's Pirates Cove. And so we were selling our flashcards, telling bird stories and so on. And so it was a really great event, right? Birds are an important part of Chamorro culture. And what's tragic is, like so many other things that colonization, change over time has brought with it, is that we've lost many of our birds. Right? And so if you talk to your elders, the birds used to fill the jungles, so many to the point where they might, Chamorros hunted birds. They kept them as pets. They trained them to fight even. But now birds are so much more rare on the island. When you go through the jungles in particular, tranquilo, there's not a lot of sound. And while we may think that as being meditative, comforting for our ancestors, it would be quite sorrowful, quite harrowing. It would be very sad. And from some elders who can recall sort of the time when birds they were basically the soundtrack of life. All of the many different kinds of birds. It's very sad to think that within just a few generations, the jungles could go silent. But for me, one of the reasons why I like to teach about the birds, talk about them, is because in the same way in which our language has gone silent in many ways, we want to keep it alive. We don't want to let it die out. And so, para esta class, we're going to go over three different things. First, vocabulary about birds. And then we are going to go over a legend. And then we are going to sing one of the most famous songs dealing with birds. And so Akli'e, Gagi Lahi Husi Akli'e Gifyonhu, Akli'e is over here. He'll be the person repeating back because it's me recording this with no audience, although Lula and Desiree are in the room. Sumahi has left the building though. But here, so just a reminder that in the Dropbox for this class, you will find what I usually call cosas sheets. These are vocabulary handouts built around different contexts, right? Cosas gihalamigima, things inside the house. Cosas paritsetsu, things at work. Cosas gifanbat kanairizan, things at the airport. Cosas giespetat, things at the hospital. And I always encourage students to use these, but to also make them. So if you know that you're going to be speaking tomorrow in a certain area around certain people, and it's going to be in a particular context, right? Then you can focus your tomorrow, especially at the beginning in that way. You may not be speaking tomorrow when you go watch the latest Marvel movie, right? But you may be speaking tomorrow when you go to a family party. Right? You may not be speaking tomorrow as much in a classroom, but you may be speaking it at a religious event, right? So think about the context so that way you can prepare the words that you want to know, that you want to use, the words that other people might be using, but then also put in sample sentences to help remind you how to use it, right? So you'll see on this sheet, there's the vocab word, but then there's also conjugations, so different ways you can conjugate it. And then after that, there's usually 3, sometimes 4 sentences showing you how you can use it. And so remember, the more that you do to help yourself in learning tomorrow, the more you'll learn, right? So if all you focus on for tomorrow is just when we get together once a week, that's not very much. So creating worksheets like this for yourself, creating vocabulary lists, doing other things outside of the time that we meet will be essential in terms of helping you learn more at a faster rate. Okay. Lonita tenestisiot. Celo, cholesterol? Yeah, ileknyo hungam. All right. First word, gupu.
Gupu.
Gumupu.
Gumupu.
Gumugupu.
Gumugupu.
Okay. All right. Gupu, of course, means to fly. And you'll note gumupu means flew. Gumugupu means flying. So get into that habit that when you see the repeating of syllables, it usually means it's active, it's happening. And gumupu si paluma.
And gumupu si paluma.
Gumugupu I paluma. Atan.
Gumupu I paluma. Atan.
Tidzahu gumupu.
Tidzahu gumupu.
All right. Maulik, maulik. And of course, Tizahu Gumupu, of course, it doesn't mean you're necessarily like Superman or anything like that. You could use that if you don't like Tizahu Gumupu gi United. Or, I mean, Maulekni United kino JetBlue, no? Or Southwest. Hungan. Oh, Taza Tiningon Mupu JetBlue. Salo. All right. Next, Sonson.
Sonson.
Itsenson.
Itsenson.
Sonson, of course, is your nest. One thing to note for these lists, I'll often include the word, if it's a noun, with the E in front of it, which is the equivalent of the in Chamoru. So that way you can see if there's normally vowel harmony applied to it. Next week or the week after, we'll be talking about vowel harmony, and it's something which is tricky, but it's beautiful once you get into it. Vowel harmony is really cool because then you can use it for random words to make people giggle. Again. Again. King Kong. Yep. Salo, safa hogos masangin na baba. Hadzi pumopok say na patsot mo. Okay. Repeat. Sonson.
Sonson.
Itsenson.
Itsenson.
So that's a vowel harmony shift right there. The O changes to the E. Okay. But let's listen to the sentences. Repeat. Atten guahat sonson giadzuna chongku.
Atten guahat sonson
Guahat sonson selo. Hey, kahulo pastesti. Hadzigai sonson esti.
Hadzigai sonson esti.
Mungi itsenson.
Mungi itsenson.
Okay, Malik. Next, gekpu.
Gekpu.
Okay, gekpu means able to fly. Root word, of course, gupu, but gekpu, gupu, gigipu becomes gekpu. And there are some who argue that gekpu is the ancient Chamorro word for bird, because the words that we use now are paluma, parajo. So some say that gekpu might have been the ancient word for a bird, something that flies. Bonito na gekpu edzuna paluma.
Bonito na gekpu edzuna paluma.
Okay. Ti gekpu ikekku.
Ti gekpu ikekku.
Ti gekpuzo.
Ti gekpuzo.
Okay. All right, next, tsada. Now, tsada is a word, it means egg. Now, you have to be very careful because tsada is one of the most charged words in terms of potential meanings in Chamorro, because tsada is like eggs that you eat, but tsada also has lots of metaphors attached to it, imagery attached to it, which deals with humor, with sexuality, and so on. So some of the most profane things like Tat Fino Gifino Chamorro that you can say uses the word tsada, right? So that's why when you're talking about tsada, you always have to be careful because some people might giggle. Like if you say, "Ooh, zahu tsada fresco," you're just saying I like fresh eggs. But for some Chamorro speakers, that's a metaphor. It's saying something else. I'm not going to describe it here because there's children in the room. But you're saying something else. We don't know what it is. We're not going to talk about it. But those of you who are watching, I would tell you what it means in Chamorro, except the kids in the room understand how to speak Chamorro. So I can't use Chamorro as a coded language.
Sino usa español?
That's right. I could say it to you in Spanish and then Akli'e couldn't understand me. But anyways, dispensa. What I'm warning you about is just be careful, because sometimes you'll use soda like in an innocent way, but for other Chamorros, it is such a charged word. Okay, repeat after me. Soda,
Soda,
itzada,
itada,
manyada,
manada,
manyanyada.
manyanada.
Okay, now manyada, lay an egg, manyanyada, laying an egg. Okay, note again the repeating of the syllable. All right, repeat. Coesta guatzadanya.
Costa Guacidani,
Manyada esta y Paluma.
manada esta y Paluma.
Pakaka, manyanyada y punadera.
Pacacan, manada y Paluma.
Y punadera tell.
Punadera.
All right. Kati,
Kati,
kumati,
kumati,
kumakati.
kumakati.
All right. So kati is cry, but it's not cry like tongues, like an elegant sort of shedding a tear. Tuhui lagohu. Kati is crying like wailing, right? So it's sometimes used for the sound that birds make, right? But it can also be when if like somebody is wailing loudly over something that's making them sad, right? Okay. Note again, kumati. Repeat, kumati.
Kumati,
Cried, kumakati.
kumakati.
Crying. Okay. Konhungo kikati.
Konhungo ikati.
Kumati ipaluma.
Kumati y Paluma.
Kumakati paluma gofat gang.
Kumakati y Paluma go for again.
All right. Maulik. Okay. Pulu.
Pulu,
Ipilu.
ipilu.
All right. Pulu is a word that can mean body hair, but it can also mean feather. Okay. And note that it can take do the vowel harmony change. Pulu becomes ipilu. Repeat after me, Tsalu. Pulu,
Pulu,
ipilu.
ipilu.
Maulik. All right. Pilundulili esti.
Pilun dulili, dulili est.
Again. Or what ma pronuncia? Dulili. Manu na klasen Paluma esti na pulo.
Manu na klasi Paluma esti na pulu.
Okay. Bonito na pulo esti.
Bonito na pulu esti.
All right. Sidus masi. Now, one thing I want to remind you about. So when you're talking about humans, gaputulu is the head on your hair. But if you're talking about hair on your face, on your arms, or anywhere else, you don't say gaputulu. That's only the hair on your head. You'll use pulu for other hair on your body. All right. Ulu.
Ulu,
Iilu.
iilu.
All right. Ulu. So worm, right? Small little creatures like that. Ulu. Although if you're a fan of Dune, like I am, and the members of my family are required to be. Zamu fan or Naizan, no? No. Oh, Akli'e said that he loves Dune so much. Wait, Hungan Salo Gof Zamu Dune, no?
Oh, okay.
Ileknya Husen Guaidza Dune. Yes. Who Guaidza how loquit Salo. So like that's family bonding right there. Family bonding. All right. So how do you say sandworm, or how do you say like a giant worm? So sometimes you can say like donkululu na ulu, like ulu unai, sandworm. But for me, a lot of times I say like ulululu unai. So like this, so like worm. This is an intense, amazing worm, unai with sand. All right, Nita. Now note the vowel harmony change. Itaftaf na Paluma kumoni I ilu.
Itaftaf na Paluma, kumoni I ilu.
Maulik. Lotadza ulu pari atrasau na Paluma.
Lotadza ulu para I atrasau na Paluma.
Dikiki I ilu.
Dikiki I ilu.
Hunga. Maulik. Holam tonu.
Holum tanu.
All right, Holam tonu is two words. Holam in tonu, land. So it's referred to the jungle, the interior of the land. If you live in the States or somewhere else and there's no jungle, Holam tonu can be used for the forest as well. Mega na Paluma gi Holam tonu.
Megay na Paluma gihalam tono.
Megay na kulebla lokwi gihalam tono.
Megay na Kulepla Lokwi gihalam tono.
Man matay Paluma siya gihalam tono.
Mamatay Paluma siya gihalam tono.
Gof tranquilo zen natristi ihalam tono pongo.
Golf tranquiludes and
Natristi.
the natristi gihalam tono pong.
Okay, Maulik. Or T Maulik sa natristi. Lo Maulik, no repeat it. Okay. All right, Papa.
Papa,
Ipapa.
Ipapa,
The wing. Asentado ipapanya estina Paluma.
Asentaru Ipapanya Esina Paluma.
Anaku ipapanya ipaluma.
Anaku Ipapanya Paluma.
All right. Now note there are several words in Chamorro that sound very similar to that. That's why your glottas and your lonats are very important, because there's a similar word that sounds like down. There's another similar word that sounds like to tear something with your teeth. All right, so pay close attention to that. All right, and finally, for many of you, you are pudzitos. Repeat, Salam.
Puditos.
Y pudzitos.
Y puditos.
Now, pudzitos comes from Spanish, and many Spanish words don't take the vowel harmony. You could force them if you wanted to. Like you could say, repeat after me, Tsalu, pudzitos y pidzitos.
Puditos y piditos.
But very few Chamorros would say that. And that's the kind of the way that you can make older Chamorros or like speakers of Chamorro giggle or get upset, as if you force vowel harmony into words that they don't use vowel harmony for. All right, so pudzitos, you can say pudzitos for like a baby chick, like a chicken, right? But it can also be for a baby chick for like a bird, pudzitos ngonga, a baby duckling, right? Pudzitos coco, a baby guam rail, right? But for me, I use pudzitos for students that are new to learning Chamorro. At the nestina kinut na pudzitos.
Atenasina canutna puditos.
Megay pudzitos kilanson mami.
Mega na puditos gilanson moni.
Pudzitos su putsamoro.
Puditos to put some more.
All right, Biba. So mga malefanay, this sheet and many others are in the Dropbox, right? So if there's something that you plan to talk a lot about in Chamorro, then prepare vocab lists to make it easier for you to practice the words that you want to say, or for you to recall and use and figure out how to use the words that you know you're going to be using like quite a bit, right? All right, so the vocab is done. Now we are going to move on to our legend. All right, aten este na Paluma y Sihek. All right, and we're going to read this. The Sihek is one of the legends that I find the most interesting, especially dealing with animals, because it is one that comes about. It may have ancient elements to it, but it definitely comes about as part of a series of legends during the Spanish period, when Chamorros are really developing the Costumbran Chamorro identity, which is kind of like the identity as Chamorros that like our great grandparents or our great grandparents had, right? Late Spanish period before the war mentality. And what's key and core in that is, of course, generosity, gineftao, hospitality, right? That you have to provide for others, you have to help others, you have to take care of others. And if you are a patron for Fanatsu, then late last year, I analyzed for the Secret Guam podcast one such legend, which talks about how Chamorros are saved when a flood destroys the world because of their generosity. Everyone else dies, but Chamorros are saved because when the gods, it's very different than a lot of the legends that we're familiar with, but because when two gods come to earth, they take the form of an old man, they take the form of humans, and people, no one helps them except for this old couple, this old Chamorro couple. And in exchange for that, the gods save them by telling them to climb Mount Lamlam as the waters rise, consuming everybody and everything on the world. But for their geneftao, for their generosity, the gods tell them that people will come here and they will learn, and they will want to learn about the respect and the love and the generosity of the people here. And so the legend of the Sihek is part of that sort of tradition about what makes Chamorros great is that we are loving, we're generous, right? It's always a little bit tricky though, because, how far does generosity extend? Should you give so much? And it's one thing if you're talking about food, but does it also mean that you should give up your rights or give up your lands, give up your language, right? Because we can argue that there's the power and the importance and the beauty of this generosity and focus on hospitality. If you're feeding people, if you want to help people, if you want to take care of people. But does it also come out then when Chamorros say, oh, you know what, I don't want to use my language around people who don't understand it. I want to be respectful. But then what happens then is that they don't pass the language on. They don't teach the language to the next generation because they're too busy not speaking it because there's others around who don't know it, right? But anyways, I can talk a lot about this. And if you want to know more about Chamorro legends, you should definitely sign up as a patron for Fanatsu. This is week 9 o'clock in the morning Patreon plug. And Akli'e is already judging me. Akli'e is looking at me like, man, esto un menciona dos veces Patreon. You've already mentioned Patreon twice. Pathetic. Pathetic. What are you, like a Twitch streamer? And so, but anyways, I do talk a lot about legends there. So that's why I bring that up. All right. Nihita atanesti na lehendi. All right. Okay, so betaitai sentencia siya at salo pon repeat, okay?
Okay.
Myla, debido na atan salo. All right. Sihek mafanan esti na Paluma.
Sihek mafanan esti na Paluma.
Unu esti ginuwebi na paharon guahan ni mansen malingu sa makotnen magen I kulebla.
Uno esti ginuwebi na paharon guahan ni mansin malingu sa
imakotne magen I kulebla.
Sa makotne magen I kulebla.
Again. Okay, wait. Bahut saged zutala sa bwenti man latsit. Okay. Unu esti ginuwebi na paharon guahan ni mansen malingu sa imakotne magen malago na pege ne na sunedo gano imakotne magen I kulebla.
Uno esti ginuwebi na paharon guahan ni mansen malingu sa imakotne magen I kulebla.
Kungen. See, that's depending on how you pronounce something. In Chamorro, if you have the Chamorro rhythm, you want to close off a vowel sound like that with an N. But the thing is, depending on how you hear it or feel it, sometimes you won't do that, right? So koni, do you close koni off with an N or do you leave it open because there's a glotta there? All right. Mapopoksa Sihek gilugat taiguihi fangogaan zeni Departamento na Agricultura kosaki sinya masota tatlu za ufen mega giholumtonu.
Mapopoksai Sihek gilugat taiguihi fangogaan zeni Departamento na Agricultura kosaki sinya masota tatlu za ufen mega giholumtonu.
All right, Maulik. Okay, pues nihita pulesti. This bird is known as the Sihek, the Micronesian kingfisher. This is one of 9 birds of Guam that has been, so Malingu is lost, Masen Malingu that has been truly lost. So this is a way that the person was trying to communicate like extinct or gone. Because of the bringing of the snake here. The Sihek are being raised, though, in places such as zoos and the Department of Agriculture, so that one day they can be released again and be plentiful in the jungle. Esti ilahendi Sihek.
Esti ilahendi Sihek.
Guaha un taklalu na biha ni sumasaga na maisa giholumtano.
Guaha on taklalu na biha ni sumasaga ni maisa gi halamtanu.
Sesu di man usa kulot asut na vestida, apaka na tapis, zan kulot kahe na panyetlu.
Sesu di manusa kulot asot na vestidu. Apaka na tapis zan kulot kahe na panyelu.
Okay. All right. So note, this is a story which deals with the appearance of the Sihek, right? The Sihek can appear orange, blue, also white and blue, right? And so part of the story explains where the Sihek comes from, where it gets its colors from. So this is the legend of the Sihek. There was a angry old woman who lived by herself in the jungle. She would often use a blue dress, a white apron, and then a shawl, which was orange. All right. Okay. Undiha matun bihuna tautau gigimanya. Zamamaisin cosinia finatanasi gui brojas.
On diha matu on bihu na tautau gigimanya. Zamamaisin cosinia finatanasi gui brojas.
Hungyan. Giminagahit timalago estina Palawan umadzuda ibihu.
Giminagahit timalagu esti na Palawan wait.
Umadzuda.
And
Umadzuda.
Umadzuda ibihu.
Hadisidi na parufatanasi ibihu undikiki na brojas za undonkulu paraguiza ibiha.
Hadisidi na para fatinas ibihu undikiki na brojas za undonkulu paraguiza ibiha.
Okay. One day, an old man came to her house and asked if he could be made a cake by her. In truth, in truth, this old lady this woman did not want to help the old man. She decided that she would make for the old man a small cake and a big one for herself. All right. Gidurantani mahotno ni brojas haripara na sigido mangkulu inatnya brojas itauta.
Gidurantin I mahotnon I brojas haripara na sigi dumankulu inatnya brojas itauta.
Okay. Hakano zamamaisin tatlu. Hakano zamamaisin tatlu.
Hakanu zamamaisin tatlu.
Sigi ibiha hanala dikiki ifinatanasnya para itauto lo sigi in fin dumankulu mas.
Sigi ibiha ha na la dikiki I fatinasnya para
Finitinasnya.
I finitanasnya para itauto lo sigi in fin dunklu mas.
Dumankulu mas. During the baking or the ovening, sahotnu oven, mahotnun, the baking of the cake, she observed that the cake of the man kept getting bigger. He would eat it and then he would ask for more. And what's it called? The old woman kept on making smaller cakes for the man, but in the end, they would keep on getting larger. Okay. Haripara gui ibiha na kada mahotno gui la dikiki na brojas guiza lokwi mismo dumikiki.
Haripara gui ibiha na kada mahotno gui la dikiki na brojas guiza lokwi mismo dumiki.
Dumidikiki.
Dumidikiki.
A los últimos, dumikiketnya gui ibiha kinu un paluma. A los últimos, dumikikinya gui ibiha kinu un paluma. Dumikiketnya.
Okay.
And I masa imina dos na brojas, mama paluma gui za kumulod asut apakad zan kulod kahet za guidza mismo paluman sihek.
Anay masa minados na brohas.
Minados. Salam.
Minados na brohas. Oh, minados.
Okay.
Na brohas. Mama Paluma gui za kolot asot apakad zan kolot kahit za guidza mismu Paluman Sihek.
Miget. The old lady, she observed that every time, what's it called? Every time the small cake would be baked, she too would end up getting smaller. In the end, she had become smaller than a bird. And then when the second cake was done, she had become a bird, and she had become the color blue, white, and orange, and she was truly now the Sihek. Ay a day. Ay a day estate. All right. Good. Chamorro legends are so interesting to me because there's such a diversity. Because you'll find some that are ancient, some that are from colonial times but use ancient themes, and then you'll find some that come about as Chamorros are hearing stories from other places, like Europe, and then they're changing those stories to match their culture and their values. And then you'll even get some that come about more recently, especially related to Tautomona and other stuff. But I always find Chamorro legends super fascinating. And there are many about Palumasya, about birds. And so I always want to share those, to talk about those, especially as, you know, to keep alive knowledge of the Paluman Marianas, the birds in the Marianas. All right, so here we go. Next, and last, we are going to be listening to a song. All right, here we go. So listen to it. And then remember, the lyrics to the song are in the Dropbox. And so you're free to look at them, to follow along. But we are going to be listening to one of the most famous songs by Chamorros about birds. And that, of course, is An Gumupu si Paluma.
An Gumupu si Paluma, bonita pavai koni. An Gumupu si Paluma, Zatmogi tanantongan uhahas.
Alright, nega, killing timatsotso.
You booked a sunny Verbo ski chalet with endless views.
Nega dispensatso. All right, here we go. Nitatsagi este, nitatsagi tagwin.
An Gumupu si Paluma, Zatmogi tronkundoni, Asangani zu Paluma, na bonita pavai koni. An Gumupu si Paluma, Zatmogi tanantongan uhahasu itanohu guahan. An kumati si Paluma, pues triste si neni. Ay Paluma manuguatu, Zabay tuk si neni. An kumanta si Paluma, lalam langi adaw, zaman flores alam tonu, zaman magufita. tao-tao. Gumupu si Paluma, Zatomogi tronkun soda, Antoguzu biospia, Itsumoru siana Paluma, I Paluma, no izu papa, Zatahi ita Gumupu. Zatahita kumanta.
All right. Hopefully you were able to hear that. Hello. Hopefully you were able to hear that. The recording was quite soft on YouTube, dispensa. So this is one of the sort of the most iconic Chamorro songs dealing with birds, but there are many songs. Now, this is an example. So this, what we listen to right now is the Johnny Sablan version, the lyrics that he recorded for the album My Chamorrons or My Chamorros. And so the imagery is simple, beautiful, elegant, also inspiring. And so I definitely encourage you to listen to this song. It's easy to follow along to. It moves slowly. The lyrics, as I said, are in the Dropbox. One thing that we should note, though, is that En Gumupu si Paluma is not a song that Johnny Sablan wrote. Now, this is the Johnny Sablan version, and it's inspiring and it's beautiful. But this is a song which is called a Tsamarita, Kantan Samarita, which means that it had a tune that was familiar to everybody, and some of the lyrics might be similar for everybody, but people made up their own verses and their own story in the song. So this song would often begin with En Gumupu si Paluma. That's how it would start. And sometimes you might start every verse with that line, when the bird flies. But then from there, it would be up to you where you would want to take the story. Would you just want to be singing about birds doing stuff in the jungle, right? Or would you want to be wooing somebody so that the birds and the metaphors that you chose were all about, were all romantic? Were you trying to tease somebody, inspire them, right? And so, for example, here we see the bird in Johnny Sablan's version, the bird lands on different trees, Zatumogi tronkondoni, right? And it stands on the pepper tree, the doni tree. And later the Zatumogi gitongentongen on the tongentongen tree. And then later the tronkonsota, the banana tree, right? But sometimes, you know, if you were trying to communicate something, the tree that you would choose would indicate, you know, it would be part of what you were implying, right? So if you were trying to make fun of somebody, you might pick kind of a funny tree for the bird to stand on, right? Or if you're trying to talk somebody up, you might pick a stronger, sturdier tree, right? And so I bring this up though, because this was a song, and this is part of the beauty of Johnny Sablan, Giminagat, is that Johnny Sablan came at a time when traditional Chamorro music was disappearing. Not completely, but people who were Maila Estina Dogan. Estina Dogan. When people were they weren't singing as much in Chamorro because now there was an emphasis on English. Young people were listening to English music, right? You're listening to Elvis Presley, right? You're listening to the Beatles. Not really so much Tan Maria, Tun Jose, right? And so what Johnny Sablan did though is that he listened to a bunch of old songs, people sang them for him, and then he wrote them down and then he recorded them. And they made changes, of course, but he recorded the tune and he recorded the style. And so that's why we can be thankful for that. But to be serious though about this style, these are not the words to the song only, right? You can make up your own words to them, and that's the way the song was first created and popularized, is that everybody knew the tune, how it was supposed to go. And in truth, there's different tunes to this song, but it was up to you. What were you trying to do? So let's go through this real fast, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about this and the importance of the birds. Oh, yes. Men has the harvesti jum jum. All right, Satlo. Maila lahiho. Okay. By hutaita gifinut Chamoru pues hago pon pula, okay? Repeat gifinut Chamoru pues pula, okay? And Gumupu si Paluma.
And Gumupu si Paluma, when the bird flies.
Okay. Zatumogi tronkondoni.
Jatumogi tronkondoni, and it stands on a pepper tree.
Okay. Hasangani zu Paluma.
It told me bird.
Hasangani zu. I Paluma hasangani zu.
Oh, the bird told me.
Songan gifinut Chamoru lokwi.
Oh.
Na I bonita para baikoni.
Na I bonita na baikoni. Want that the beauty will be mine.
Yeah. Umbi hungan salu. Na I bonita na Palawan by hukoni hungan. Lo zao tamanon songan. The beauty will be mine. Oh yes, the beauty will be mine. And no again in Wayne's World. No, my love, and no again in Wayne's World, right? Put Gitala. Oh yes. Oh no, put si Cassandra. Put si Cassandra, T Gitala. Oh, okay. Oh yes. It will be mine. Okay. All right. Taitesti. And Gumupu si Paluma.
And Gumupu si Paluma, when the bird flies.
Zatumogi tongan.
Zen tumogi tongan, and it flies on a tongan tree.
It stands like tumogi. Okay. Huhahasu itanohu.
Huhasu itanohu. I'm remembering my land.
Itanohu guahan.
Itanohu guahan, my land.
Okay. And so this is what was interesting about Johnny Sablan's version of this, is that he put a lot of Chamorro nationalism or pride into it, when for a lot of the older versions of it, the ones that people made up, it was much more silly and fun. A lot of it was also about heartbreak too. Like the bird would fly, and then it would land on a tree, and then you would watch the funeral procession for your love go by. Ouch. Right? Or the bird would fly and then it would land on a tree outside the church where the person that you loved was getting married to somebody else, right? But Johnny Sablan's is much more nationalistic, because it's about, he's using these metaphors of the birds and the jungle to remember who we are, right? The Chamorro people, because that was, for Johnny Sablan at this time, as he said, I love the songs of my native Marianas. Every time I sing, I seem to find my identity. That he found who he was, or who, he found his identity, his culture. He found that through the songs. And that's what he kind of put into the lyrics. Okay. And Kumakti si Paluma.
And Kumakti si Paluma, when the bird cries.
Pues tristi si neni.
Pues tristi si neni, then the baby is sad.
Oh, esti kalang neni kalang I winaidzanya.
Oh. Then my love is sad.
Hungan. Sweetheart. Yeah, Munga Malefa, neni can be for your baby, but it can also be for your baby. Hey, and now that's the most Chamorro song that has nothing to do with Chamorros. I would never find another lover. #1 requested song at all Chamorro weddings, Casey and Jojo. Oh, dispenses after the electric slide, my love. I Paluma Manu Guatu, Zabe Tok Tok Sineni. Salutaita.
I Paluma Manu Guatu, Zabe Tok Tok Sineni. Go bird.
No, Manugatu, like
Oh.
Mungiho.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where did the bird go?
Again.
And I'm gonna
Talk si sweetheart.
hug my love.
My darling. Oh, darling. Okay. And Kumanta si Paluma.
And Kumanta si Paluma when the bird sings.
Lam lam lami at dao.
Lum 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 iat dow when the sun is shining.
Zamem flores halum tanu.
Zamam flores halum tanu when the flowers are flowering in the blooming in the jungle.
Naman mago fitauto.
Zaman magof itauta and the people are happy.
Again. And Gumupu si Paluma.
And Gumupu si Paluma when the bird is flying.
Zatumogi trunkun soda.
Zan tumogi trunkun soda and the bird is standing on a tree soda.
Banana. Aga.
Oh.
Hataguzuna by Siha.
Hatagujuna biaspiha. It told me that I'm gonna look for
Again. Chamoru siana Paluma.
Itzamora siena Paluma, the Chamoru birds.
Again. I Paluma.
I Paluma, oh bird.
Wow, Tello. Songan consciente, por favor. I bird. Na idzu un papa.
Na idun papa, give me a wing.
Zatahihita gumupu.
Zatahihita Gumupu, and we fly together.
Zatahihita kumanta.
Zatahihita Kumanta, and we will sing together.
Again. Oh, sidus masitelo. Sa hago lopit sa gwengweng timegay bidomo. Lohu agradesi ha. Oh, at the nestina podgun. Hakeke kanui kananya. Again. My love, what's the name of that candy where you're trying to like get down to the middle of it? No, the one with the owl. Is it Tootsie Pop? Again. Hafa Tootsie Pop night kananya. She's treating her hands like they're Tootsie Pops. She's like, Magellan's gold is inside. Okay, so Ekungo Kasina Kanta. Listen to this song. The Johnny Sablan version is quite lovely and touching because when we think about it, the birds are good or bad. The birds are a very strong metaphor for the Chamorro people, right? Because the tied to the land, but lyrical, musical. Chamorros have prioritized creativity, poetry, singing for thousands of years, right? And so when elders talk about how the song of birds used to fill the island, but the voices of the Chamorros also used to fill the island with people singing to themselves, to each other. One of the glories of the Cantan Samarita was that you could share a song with somebody. You could start singing a song, and then if somebody walked by, they might stop and sing with you for a little bit and then keep going. And then as you walk, somebody else might decide to jump in and say something to you and join your song, and then you go your own ways, right? But so the birds are a beautiful metaphor, but they're also an apt, sort of more tragic metaphor, because the snake is one of those things that can represent massive, drastic cultural changes, threats to the island, to the people, to the environment. And so the birds have been greatly diminished. And so, when Johnny Sablan was writing this or recording this, the issue of the brown tree snake and Chamorro birds wasn't as big on Guam. But when you read this song now and sing it now, and you think about what Chamorros are trying to do in terms of empowering themselves, come together, reconnect to the land, protect what is theirs, it's almost prescient. It's it makes a lot of sense. But don't feel too bad. In Guam, unfortunately, many of our jungle birds are gone, but you can find many of them in the northern islands, right? You can find many of them there. Oh, yeah. Malagwa Shinanamo? Oh, adjust to gwang gwang. Adjust to gwang. Okay. Speaking of birds, you may hear me refer to my daughter as Tsagwang Gwang. That's a native bird. Unfortunately, you can't find it on Guam anymore. But yes, and so again. So when we think about birds, don't just think about them in terms of sort of pretty things in the background of life, right? Or don't just think about them as just a signifier of tragedy and loss, right? Because it is true that the jungles may not be filled with the songs of birds, but we can still fill the lives of our children and our families with the stories of birds, with songs about birds, with legends, with wisdom from them, the creativity, what they represented. That can all still be there in our lives. And so, Hadziho, Kalang Hogwen on a Potgun, Gihaus moving castle. Hadzinan Yadzu? Si Jobin? No, wait. Hadzinan Yadzu Natauto? Si Ben? No, so I don't remember. But Akli'e looks like the boy that pretends to be an old duendes from Howl's Moving Castle. All right, so Sidus Masino Hamzo Todos, thank you for tuning into this sort of late class. But yes, I hope that you enjoyed it. Yeah, I don't normally record these classes, but I just felt bad because so many of you joined yesterday in the Zoom, but the internet just couldn't handle. It couldn't handle.
Markle.
Oh yes, see Markle. I know Inanya Hungan. And so, if you remind me, I'll give you your bird saying next week when we meet in class. But until then, adios. Este ki manali hit tatlo. Sige si tatlo ba.